Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Nuance. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. So I came across a video, right, where everybody is very pissed at Beyonce, and I am like, why are they this pissed? Like everybody is saying, black people are always this, the other black people are always that, and some people act like their oppression are more than the other. And I am asking, when did you start comparing people's oppression to your own oppression? That is madness, right? If that is where you all have gotten to at this point in time. So now what happened? Beyonce is in Paris. She went, she's been on tour, her Paris show and all that. Guess what happened? So she wore a Buffalo Soldiers uh, t-shirt. And that is the problem. Everybody out there is criticizing Beyonce, saying how black people always support that kind of story. And I am asking, last I checked, Buffalo Soldier is also part of black history. Is there anything that I am missing out? And absolutely, I will be waiting on you to walk me through it, because from the things I am hearing or people are saying, it looks like I do not understand this particular one very well. But you see, I am depending on you this time around. When you listen to my commentary, maybe I am missing out on something, right? So now I am asking, why is it that it's always a hardworking black, maybe celebrity or something? Let's get into this.
If a Latino told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? If an indigenous person told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? If an Asian American told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? If a white person told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? Because apparently you would. And mind you, this isn't a situation where a Fox News reporter got the facts wrong and, tapped into their misogyny war bag. Like, nah, this is just a situation where Beyonce is wrong for doing this. She's 100% in the wrong for not vetting this and for even showing up, popping out with that shirt on in the first place. And yet, still, excuses, false equivalencies run amok. There's even talk about how Native Americans own slaves. And I'm not denying that some Native Americans own slaves, because that's objectively true. But the way that this talking point is being used, especially in this moment, is so funny to me, because it's coming from the same group of people that hated when other races and ethnic groups categorize all black people as one monolithic group. And the same group of people who hate when that happens are the exact same people categorizing all Native Americans as one monolithic group. Mind you, we're talking about thousands of tribes with their own customs, languages, and ways of thinking. And yet, we're just going to conveniently put them all into one monolithic group to say that they all did this, they were all engaged in this, therefore, Beyonce's actions are excused in full. I also love hearing the excuse that this Buffalo Soldiers t-shirt was taken from a website, written by AI, and Beyonce didn't release the merch. Like, that doesn't make it worse, because you're a Beyonce fan. When have you known Beyonce to half-ass anything? You know this. I know this. Her and her team are well known to vet everything, to go over every single meticulous detail. That's what makes her albums amazing, her art amazing, her music amazing, her stage presence and performances amazing. And yet she let this slide, and then didn't even add in the nuance of the Buffalo Soldiers and how they were enslaved and psychologically set up to fight for the U.S. empire, which makes the whole thing so much more worse and horrible when you really put it into context, when you add in the nuance of white people putting an enslaved, oppressed class against another enslaved, oppressed class, all to benefit white people at the end. But no, accountability must be dodged, because Beyonce is dropping a rock album next. So prepare for nothing else to come out of this but excuses, false equivalences, and talking points that just lack nuance entirely.
I've spoken on the five civilized tribes regarding chattel slavery and the Buffalo Soldiers several times in the last few years. And now, because Beyonce had a very tone-deaf message with her shirt depicting the Buffalo Soldiers, and the back of the shirt with an excerpt that said this, the antagonists were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement. Warring Indians, bandits, cattle thieves, murderous gunmen, bootleggers, trespassers, and Mexican revolutionaries. First of all, those Mexican revolutionaries were indigenous people. And to put those Mexican revolutionaries and those tribal Native Americans into the same category as murderers, thieves, and bootleggers, well, what does that sound like to you? Reminding you that these are our lands and we were fighting people who were invading our lands, trying to prevent them from moving westward to take more of our lands. Now, I have to make these videos every so often because I often find that 90% of the people who want to bring up the Buffalo Soldiers or 90% of the people who want to bring up the 5 civilized tribes and chattel slavery don't really know the nuanced history behind it. So lucky for you, I have studied these histories very in depth and know the nuance amongst both the Buffalo Soldiers and the 5 civilized tribes when it comes to chattel slavery. So basically, I'm just going to recap shit that I could have past that I've already posted sources for. For one, 5 civilized tribes and Buffalo Soldiers have nothing to do with one another. While they were around the same time period, they were still 2 different times that it happened. One was pre-Civil War, the other was post-Civil War. They were also in 2 different regions. One was in the southeast, the other was in the southwest. Prior to the 5 civilized tribes enslaving African Americans and participating in chattel slavery, those exact tribes were actually harboring runaway slaves. Some of them also married each other and started families. They were accepted as part of the tribe. While this was problematic for white slave owners because they couldn't have a bunch of slaves running off and going to find refuge with all the Indians. So they started marrying into the tribe to build an alliance. And then that's how they started to indoctrinate people. This caused infighting within the tribes because many of the tribal members were like, nah, we don't do that. That's not our thing. And others went ahead and succumbed to white supremacy. There were also those that actually bought their own family members to also keep them safe. And the Seminole, they actually told them, you can go over here, hang out over there, do your thing, practice your culture, speak your language, do your spirituality. You just gotta give us a little tax every year. We'll quote unquote own you, but you do what you want to do. Some people in the tribe that had plantations and owned slaves were just as cruel as the white folks. And others, not so. Others practiced the traditional form of kinship slavery that a lot of Native Americans practiced prior to colonization. And kinship slavery was more of indentured servitude. You were not treated equally. You owed a debt, you paid off the debt. Many of the Native slaveholders allowed their slaves to read, to write, actually use them as interpreters. And all of this came to be because white people infiltrated into the tribes, conditioned them, taught them Christianity, assimilated them, because white people needed natives not to harbor black slaves. And this is how they got their name, the 5 civilized tribes, because they were the 5 tribes that participated in chattel slavery, or they were civilized like the Indians. That is not the same thing as other tribes who did take people from raids and then sell them to other people for food, clothing, essentials, things like that. Also weapons and horses, things that would help protect them. That was also very common in Native American cultures prior to 1492. But the tribes would integrate you into their societies, not assimilate you. You became part of the people. You weren't forced into labor. The difference between the raids and chattel slavery is that these tribes really didn't hold on to the slaves. They traded them to survive. Whereas the 5 civilized tribes actually held on to the slaves and had them work on plantations. So when you brought up the Apache, the Comanche, and all of them, that's what that is. And they also did that with other native tribes. Native people were raiding each other and taking each other and selling them off to each other to help protect their tribes for survival. When we talk about the Buffalo Soldiers, and they went through the same thing. Fresh out of the Civil War, newly found freedom, and an opportunity to make money to help their families, to prosper, to live a better life. All they had to do was round up all them Indians, put them into reservations, and give paid for any scouts that left back. There were some that went along with it, was cool with it. They were indoctrinated into hating indigenous people. There were others that were not. Often those people would get kicked out of the army. They wouldn't receive their benefits. They could also receive punishment. They refused to do these horrific things. A lot of the times, the Indians and the Buffalo Soldiers would trade with each other. There was actually times when they did get along, and there were times when they didn't. But remember that Buffalo Soldiers, officers were all white men. As far as natives being supportive of the Confederacy or the Union, that really wasn't much of a concern to Plains natives and Southwestern natives. Their concern was any of the U.S. Army moving westward. So they would side with anybody as long as they can get more Americans to go back to the East Coast. Some actually fought for the Confederacy, some actually fought for the Union. There was a bunch who didn't fight for either side. Either way, both natives and black people were manipulated, coerced, promised privilege, and then got it taken away from them when they didn't deliver on the evils that they wanted people to do. They rewarded you if you did the bad things, and they punished you if you did what was right. And just like now, people then were also brainwashed and colonized. Because there's a lot of POC that have not decolonized and perpetuate white supremacy on a day-to-day basis, especially on this app. All of these things are divide and conquer tactics. They always have been. They always will be. They've always needed us fighting each other or harming each other in order for them to win. But see, that's the conversation people are not willing to have, because people don't want to admit to their pasts and their ancestors' pasts. People don't want to have the nuanced conversations because everybody's trying to be the most oppressed, which is weird. And in the meantime, while we all sit and complain about white supremacy, we perpetuate it and uphold it on a day-to-day basis by spreading misinformation, not talking about the nuances of history, causing erasure, and playing oppression Olympics with one another. And that's just only some of the shit we do to each other to cause division. At the end of the day, what I hope people can take from all of this is that to understand history, you have to understand everybody's perspective. You have to understand how colonization works and how white supremacy works. You also have to understand how the psychology of white supremacy works. Because just making really quick videos on a very nuanced history doesn't cover it all, and it leads to more division and generalizations and prejudice and stereotypes amongst each other. So everybody got to do better. And if you don't know, ask somebody who does.
I love Beyonce down just as much as the next person, y'all. I really do. And as a Black and Native woman, one who is getting her master's in Indigenous law, I believe I'm qualified to speak on this topic, and provide some education. Before I even get into this, I do want to acknowledge that the history of the Buffalo Soldiers, very complex, very complicated. This is actually very interesting because I just got done really deep diving into the Civil War era of Indigenous law and federal Indian policy. Basically, Buffalo Soldiers did play a big part in enforcing colonial westward expansion. And while on one hand there was an opportunity for Black Americans to find a little bit more stability by pursuing the military and all this, they were given an opportunity to survive in white supremacist society, but at what cost? Because this came at the direct expense of Indigenous sovereignty and lives. It's just really sick because they were forced to remove Indigenous people off their ancestral lands and force them onto reservations. So in the end, both Black and Native people are really victims of U.S. settler colonialism. So then for Beyonce to go and enforce that Indigenous people are the enemies in westward expansion and U.S. colonialism, like, girl, I thought we were for the people. I thought we were for liberation. And I do think there was an opportunity where it could have been done for her to just, represent the Buffalo Soldiers, because obviously that was the path for Black Americans at the time. But to double down and say Indigenous people were antagonists is really just pitting two people against each other. And I'm also confused because I know Beyonce has deep roots to New Orleans, Louisiana. I think she had her wedding there or something. And that has a deep, rich history of Indigenous and Black solidarity. So for her to pit these two, peoples of oppression against each other is truly so sad. And I just feel like your fave icon wouldn't do that. your fave icon who's looking to change the world in a positive light wouldn't put oppressed people against each other. So I don't know why she did that. And I feel like at her level, things are very intentional. So it's just a little bit scary. And, you know, I was a base stan, but I don't know how to feel about this. So if there is anything I can ask, you know, Beyonce, please do better. I do want people to be educated. You know, it's really us against them in this larger battle of oppression and, you know, colonization that's still ongoing. And it looks like Beyonce's just trying to be on the side of the oppressors. And I guess from all this, I would just want to ask Beyonce why? Why promote this message? Why have that writing on your back? And maybe she doesn't care. She's not for the people. Maybe I just need to accept that. Sad. I mean, you know what they say. Never meet your idols.
So we back to another round of Beyonce discourse on this wretched app, because so many of y'all cannot stop yourselves from taking your tepid understanding of concepts like colonialism and capitalism and feeling the need to regurgitate and poorly attempt to teach a lesson that you yourselves have not grappled with or learned. It is tired. It is offensive at this point. And most of all, it's just boring. Y'all are boring because you're cowards. You're absolutely cowards, because at this moment, you're taking all of this supposed understanding of these concepts, and instead of focusing all of that supposed education on the actual white supremacist that is in control of this colonial project here, that is enacting its own genocide, and who is assisting another white supremacist enact their own genocide, y'all have somehow found your way around to another black woman to put out to focus your attention and your ire on. And you don't see how you're useful idiots, tools of the very state that you purport to be resisting? Y'all don't see it? You poorly attempt to wade into the waters of sociocultural critique when you have no grounding or understanding of culture. You are poorly attempting to put scripts upon African Americans and our cultures and the people who we revere, when the only way that you can see us is through the white imagination. You all cannot see us through the ways in which we've defined ourselves and the ways through which we are writing our own stories. Because instead of listening to us, you keep trying to tell us who we are. You're boring cowards. And the wild part is, so many of y'all who cannot keep African Americans out of your mouth are black folks existing safely in America, the safety that our culture provided you. You exist safely here from your own black populations that are full of their own issues, but I never see y'all asses on this app talking about those. Certainly not to the same degree. You can't keep African Americans out your mouth, but you don't talk about your own cultures. And it's real interesting. Like, I'm tired at this point. Y'all do not have the range to do this. Could you please leave us the fuck alone? Could you leave us the fuck? You see black people happy about, seeing the clips and things like that. We telling jokes about shit, and here y'all come with these tepid regurgitations that have not grappled with any of these concepts. And the wild part is, it only sounds smart to people who are just impressed by academic rhetoric, because if they break down the things that you're actually saying, then people who've actually grappled with this stuff know that y'all know what the fuck you talking about. Because again, in this moment, the site of your critique, the site of extraction, is the same site of extraction for the state. You're tepid, you're boring, and just impotent. You guys are completely and totally impotent. Please leave us the fuck alone. Please. Like, I'm tired of it. Just leave us alone. Y'all don't have the range.
Beyonce Buffalo Soldiers, let me hit you with this science first. This is from a Latino leader. He stated that, I know that Black Americans aren't receiving their fair share of democracy, but I'm prejudiced. I don't feel like Black Americans should receive or be entitled to the same benefits that we receive, Latinos. And this man speaks for all minority groups. They have no problem with being underneath the white man, but the issue is when they're either on the same status as Black people or underneath Black people, they have a problem. And their insecurities and inferiority complexes is showing. Because when Shakira and Bad Bunny blowing up, everybody support them. No one tried to chop down Bad Bunny. He never said anything about none of these ICE raids. No one's shooting shots at Bad Bunny. People still support him. But since Beyonce is light years away from all of them, and Beyonce is a Black American, it's an issue. Oh, her status, she got influence. Black people got status, Black people got influence. They're feeling inferior. We gotta find a way to chop them down. Cool, you do have some Black Americans out there that have no problem with being somebody's lap or being under new management, but for the majority of us, we're now that we're taking pride in our status and influence, it's a problem, and they want to chop you down. No one's more influential than Beyonce. No one has a higher status than Beyonce right now as we speaking. None of, but it's crazy when Black people support Bad Bunny. Black people supported Shakira. Black people even supported Taylor Swift. There was no problems. No one's trying to chop down Bad Bunny. And look at what's happening in the Latino community.
So first, Black people were settlers. Right? Y'all remember the girl that said Black people were settlers? Then had to backtrack and say, oh, I didn't mean it like that. Now, because Beyonce wore a Buffalo Soldiers t-shirt, she agrees with the genocide of natives. I don't know what's going on, but the way that y'all are not taking into account African American pain and struggles and the things that we had to do to survive post chattel slavery is genuinely disgusting to me. I'm tired of y'all trying to make Black people look like we are oppressors in this country. It's really getting to a point, and I need y'all to stop. What we not finna do is get on the Buffalo Soldier. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Like, we're not doing that because y'all are not providing context. Like, y'all aren't doing.
Once again, y'all are throwing away an opportunity to have educational discussions about the Black American history being highlighted by Cowboy Carter just so y'all can make lazy ass critiques of Beyonce, because it is more popular to criticize Beyonce than it is to have intellectually honest and well-informed discussions about Black American history. That is why these takes lack so much historical context and information, like the fact that by the 1860s, Native Americans were enslaving thousands of African people. It was documented that the Cherokee people at one point had almost 5,000 African people enslaved within its nation at one time, and that's just them, right? But saying that information would make it complicated for people to push the narrative that they're trying to push about Beyonce. Because in reality, y'all don't give a fuck about this history. Y'all wouldn't be talking about this history if it wasn't for Beyonce. And y'all clearly don't care enough to actually educate yourself about this history instead of just Googling a couple things so that you can open up this app and open up your mouth because you don't want to open up a book. That is why this conversation has only produced controversy and contention since the very beginning of it, because the person who started it got on here talking out the side of her neck about Black culture that not only could she not recognize, but she had to listen to Black Southerners with 2 Black parents talk about the cultural references in that performance to even be informed of that culture. She, just like a lot of y'all who keep trying to reheat her nachos, was truly only interested in being right and not in having a constructive conversation about Black Southern history and the juxtaposition it has in American history overall. That's why y'all just keep saying she was right and regurgitating her talking points in a different font. It's very unoriginal, exhausting, and
Let's talk about Beyonce and her Buffalo Soldiers t-shirts. The fact that we expect our celebrities to know more about the historical context of Black history in the United States than our politicians is wild to me. I do not have any expectation that Beyonce nor any other celebrity that I happen to listen to or watch on TV would have information about Buffalo Soldiers outside of what was taught in the American educational system. And so many of these conversations are without nuance because the Buffalo Soldiers were given weapons and freedom in a colonial system with no knowledge of how to do anything but survive. And the Native Americans that did enslave Africans, the same thing. A colonial system with no knowledge of anything but how to survive within that system. Should somebody on her team have known better? Should have researched better? Sure. But is my expectation of Beyonce to know this or to any celebrity? No. Let's stop looking at our celebrities for the solutions. Do the research ourselves or ask an historian or someone who actually does know the history. But do I think Beyonce is intentionally out here promoting white propaganda, Americana? No. I think Beyonce is trying to do what she knows how within her framework to not lose pieces of American history like country music.
People are having discourse about this shirt that Beyonce is wearing when she popped out for like her Paris performance and shit for Cowboy Carter. And this is the back of the shirt. The shirt, if you don't know history and shit like that, is of the Buffalo Soldiers, which was like an Afro-American regiment in the Union Army or the American Army during like the Indian Wars and shit, during Manifest Destiny. And I'm not here to talk about like Beyonce specifically. I'll talk about this whole shirt and the Beyonce fiasco and like another video, most likely either later today or tomorrow morning, whichever I remember to do first. But I do think this is a good point to talk about like the intersection between Afro-American history and like the way Afro-Americans do participate in colonization and while that conversation has never been had in Nuance and has had, and like every time it does pop up, it's never one that like is a fruitful conversation because Afro-Americans solely do think of ourselves and believe ourselves as solely as victims of Americanism and never want to confront the reality of the way that Afro-Americans do participate and sometimes do benefit from American imperialism and all the shit that America has done to people of the global South. But at the same time, people of the global South, outside of the Afro-American community, Indian, Native Americans included, they sometimes have this conversation about Afro-Americans and benefiting from American imperialism and like colonization from a standpoint that's not really meant to air their grievances and talk to Afro-Americans about the issue to form a coalition. It's more so since you just to make it seem like Afro-Americans are just as bad as white people, but they're just as bad as white Americans, and we're part of the problem. We're part of the problem, and it takes nuance about it. Takes no nuanced history of what Afro-Americans have also had to deal with at the hands of the American government and the American war machine. Because all the things are very important nuance and conversation. Like the Buffalo Soldiers themselves that like so many Afro Americans are like praising and shit like that. You would think that like they are equivalent to like the Black Panther Party or the Freedom Riders and shit like that. That like they were part of like Nat Turner's rebellion and shit like that. The Buffalo Soldiers were tools of American imperialism. They were not fighting for Afro-American liberation or like fighting against like colonization shit like that. They were tools of American imperialism to take more land from the Native American people, the native population, the native inhabitants of Turtle Island. That they were fighting to take more land from Native Americans, the Lakota and many other tribes who either called that region home or were displaced to that region, and they were fighting Indian wars to increase manifest destiny, to fulfill manifest destiny, and get more land for white Americans. Not Americans, specifically for white Americans. That would go on to open doors for the Homestead Act to be implemented in American culture, an act which African Americans would barely even get barely even get the chance to participate in, and even less African Americans would have the chance to succeed at the Homestead Act. Majority of the recipients of the Homestead Act were white Americans who got the benefit of colonized land, got the benefit of free land from the U.S. government that Black Americans helped fight for, but would get no benefit from. And you can fast forward to the whole Kamala and Obama stories where like so many African Americans romanticize the idea of them and love them so much when quite literally they didn't do shit for Black Americans, and they regularly helped further American imperialism and defended American involvements in genocides or talk down so heavily about like BIPOC countries that just wanted to be left alone. That like Kamala, Cory Booker, Jasmine Crockett, shit like that, they were defending a genocide being orchestrated by a country that doesn't even fucking like Black people, that forcibly sterilized Ethiopian Jewish women. The same country that trains the cops that Black people have had to do protests and marches and sit-ins against. That like Obama was like regularly deporting so many Latino immigrants and shit like that. He was supporting more people than Trump right now. He bombed the shit out of Middle Eastern countries. He defended Israel himself, and like Black Lives Matter institution formed under his administration. That you romanticize these ideas of Black Americans succeeding in like Black American culture as if it's some big win to be included in American imperialism, to be included in such violent, evil actions as this is the goalpost and will lead to African American liberation. And every time it fails because you cannot succeed in a system that is built to belittle you. It's built on slavery. It's built on colonization. It's built on centuries of blood and bones of our ancestors and 1,000 other BIPOC people's ancestors and blood and shit. That like you have to understand it, and you cannot in the same vein talk about like the experience and persecution that Africans have dealt at the hands of America, and at the same time romanticize the ideals of having a seat at the table in America. At the same time, being able to hide and kiki with all these white billionaires and these white people. I've romanticized people like Pharrell Williams and the Carters and Tyler Perry, like that, who themselves have all participated in American imperialism. Like Beyonce herself is right now romanticizing doing propaganda for the American war machine, which again we'll talk about that in another video. But like that's an important thing to understand. And like I said, it's also very very important to understand that African Americans themselves are victims of American imperialism. You cannot come up here in good conscience, want to have discourse about American imperialism, and not include that nuance that African Americans themselves are mostly victims of American imperialism in American propaganda. That African Americans are some of the poorest communities in America. That African Americans make up the bulk of the prison population in America. African Americans built the economy of the United States. That they built the culture of the United States along with Native Americans and shit. And also Latino American shit. That you have that conversation, you have to have that nuance that like African Americans have participated in the colonization of America, but also have been victims of the upset colonization. And it's also it's a pure fucking contradiction to romanticize and chase after the dream of being included in America, but at the same motherfucking time you want to talk about the experiences and the negative experience that we have dealt with in American culture. Those are contradictions because they do not exist in the same vein. You cannot be the colonizer and the victim. You have to choose one. You cannot talk about your persecution at the same time you want to be included at the table that does the persecution. All this foundational Black American bullshit and this whole concept of romanticizing the American flag, saying it's our flag too. Me, you, and every black person in this country was brought to this country by force. No one wanted to be here. From day one, that since we touched this soil, it has been bloodshed and brutality. And every African American that has fought for the American government has been part of it and has advocated for inclusion and integration within American culture, has been a pick me, has been a COON, except for Malcolm for Martin Luther King, a discussion in another video. But you have to understand it, and you can have in good conscience think that you're not a colonizer at the same time that you're like romanticizing American black American capitalists. At the same time that you are romanticizing the Buffalo Soldiers and Kamala and black Democrats and black American politicians and shit like that. Because they have never done anything for black Americans, and they are themselves are helping America fuel its war machine. That black U.S. general that got up here and spoke out against Ibrahim Traoré is a pure example of black Americans is a modern example of black Americans participating in U.S. colonization and U.S. imperialism.
This is all I got from this video, and I am going to try as much as I can to explain to the best of my knowledge, but then I will absolutely read your comments to learn more about Buffalo Soldiers, because I remember there was a time I brought something about those Buffalo Soldiers coming out from Native American indigenous people, right? So now you all know that Beyonce is in Paris, and she stepped out with this for her concert. She stepped out with that t-shirt, Buffalo Soldiers, and the Native Americans, Latinos, are not having it. They are pissed. They are mad that Beyonce is promotes white supremacy or white supremacy propaganda and all that. And I am asking why. Because I remember back then when I talked about Buffalo Soldier, how they helped fight and all that. Now, the natives, or the same people that call black people settlers, are out fighting Beyonce. One thing I have noticed is that they actually do not want to see a black person doing absolutely great. It's like it's a crime for a black person to be great, to be seen, to have say, or to really be out there doing her thing. But I am not going to, it's okay to focus on that because that is the energy they give black people. But now, while I was checking through and seeing other things, and I found out also that the native tribes, particularly the southern easterners, and also had like 5 tribes, and the same people that are out here screaming Buffalo Soldier, that Beyonce should know better. The story behind Buffalo Soldiers also enslaved black people, and why they did that was because they also wanted to dominate white society, which practiced slavery extensively, right? So now I am asking, what is the problem? Because at this point in time, I do not understand if there is something black people did before. Because now I was going through trying to find out what the problem. Some people were like, you can also be a Beyonce's fan and at the same time say that what Beyonce did is bad. And I am like, what did she do? What did she do that is causing these problems? Now, going through, I also found that a Buffalo Soldier it's also black. Is it not black also? Buffalo Soldier is also black history. Or is it not? See, I am asking all this because I do not want to be the person that doesn't know what she is saying and she is out here defending something that she is not supposed to defend, right? So I am asking again, is Buffalo Soldiers not part of black history? Maybe getting to know will make me understand. Maybe I am being dumb or I am trying to defend black people all the time for no reason. Now, the other guy, the one that has nose ring. I think that young man is a migrant because that guy, he is a leftist. I mean, you really need to see their group where they are always out there trying to, but that is not the case right here. So he was like, if someone told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace or their settlement, would you defend that? Then I am going to ask, how did black people become the enemy of peace? And he also went further to say, if the Native Americans tells you the same thing, would you defend that? If Asian American told you African Americans were the enemies of, would you defend that? And I am asking, how are black people the ones not? I just don't understand it, because how did black people become the enemy of peace and order? Because there are some things you say, I am just confused. Maybe there is something, did she kill somebody? Sorry, but I am just, did she pierce somebody's throat or something? Everybody's like saying she is wrong. Wrong in what? Wearing a Buffalo Soldiers shirt? See, firms, at this point in time, I don't know if I am finding the right word to use on this, but I am absolutely going to let you educate me on this. Maybe I do not understand better. Right? Please kindly walk me through this. Let me understand where she is wrong at this point in time. Why is she being criticized? When did she become, because everybody's saying that she has been, black people have been oppressed, but they make it look like some people's oppression are more important than other people's oppression. You see, when people come from this talking point, I want you to know that they have something already in mind, especially all these people. You see, when people tell you that black people, it has always been, this is always what I hear from other people. Black people make it look like their oppression was, when did you start comparing other people's oppression to what happened to you? That is how far they can go to make sure that whatever you went through is not valid, because it has always been used, speaking about your oppression, what you went through. One thing I love is that black people do not hide it when they talk about their oppression. They say it loud and clear so that people will know, people will hear. Some people are also very corny that they don't speak up what they go through, right? And then in the end come out to blame you for not knowing, right? Or for not also helping them speak out. How am I supposed to speak for myself and also come out to poke you to speak for yourself? Enough of that comparison, because I know you all are in competition, because at some point I found that it is now competition to know whose suffering was more. See, I'm so sorry, but suffering there is no need comparing somebody's suffering or tragic experience or oppression. It's diabolical that people will want to compare all that just to weigh in to see if you suffered more or they suffer. Like, what nonsense is that? It is not making sense on a very serious note. And that should stop, right? Say what happened to you. Let us say what happened to us. Not you are going to sit down and watch black people say what happened to them. You are not going to speak up, right? And then in the end, you start saying that you went through this and you went through it and you didn't tell us. It's just like if I tell you that I had tooth extraction, right? Okay, it's me coming to say that you guys did not check up on me when I had tooth extraction. Did I tell you that I went for tooth extraction? No. So how would you know? How would you know? Because it looks like you are now the universe the man that knows everything all over. I don't know, but I hope you understand where I am coming from. It's really unfair that people continue to think like this. I am going to draw the curtain here. Bye for now.